Picture two versions of you at 50. One checks the price of every ordinary pleasure before saying yes. The other still thinks carefully, but money no longer decides every move. They did not begin with different salaries or extraordinary luck. The difference began with a few quiet decisions in their 30s. If you are already in your 30s and feel late, that may sound cruel. It is not. Your 30s are not the perfect decade to begin. They are something more useful. The decade when enough time remains for small actions to become structural changes in your life. This is not a story about becoming a millionaire by 40. It is about what changes by 40, 50, and 60 when you stop treating wealth as a distant event and start building a system. The surprising part is that the first reward is not a larger account. It is a quieter life. Fewer emergencies become disasters. More decisions become choices. And the future stops feeling like a bill that has not arrived yet. To see how that happens, begin with Sebastian on an ordinary Tuesday evening, age 32, staring at three numbers. His pay has landed. Rent, food, transport, and the minimum payments have already claimed most of it. What remains is not impressive. After a long pause, he moves a small amount into a separate account. It feels almost pointless, like trying to fill a bathtub with a teaspoon. This is where many people stop. They compare the first contribution with the final goal and decide the gap is proof of failure. But wealth is rarely built by one heroic transfer. It is built when the transfer happens again before your mood, memory, or monthly temptations can interfere. So Sebastian makes the first decision that changes his future. Payday will trigger progress automatically. Even if the amount begins small, saving is no longer what happens if the month goes well. It becomes one of the things the month must make room for. Automation sounds boring. That is its power. A goal depends on enthusiasm. A system survives a tiring week, an expensive dinner, and the version of you who would rather start next month. The amount can rise later. The habit needs to exist now. Then comes the second decision. Before chasing high returns, he builds a cash buffer. At first, it covers one unexpected repair, then 1 month of essential costs, eventually several months. The exact target depends on his work, responsibilities, and tolerance for risk. The buffer seems slow because it does not produce an exciting screenshot. Yet it changes Tuesday mornings. When the washing machine breaks, he does not borrow at a punishing rate. When work becomes unstable, he has time to think before accepting the first bad option. That is the first visible change wealth makes. Not luxury, but distance between a problem and panic. A cash reserve buys breathing room. Breathing room improves decisions. Better decisions protect the reserve. A small financial asset begins changing Sebastian before it meaningfully changes his net worth. But a buffer alone will not carry him decades forward. Once expensive debt is under control and the emergency foundation is forming, he starts investing for distant goals. Not with money needed next year, and not by betting everything on a single exciting idea. He chooses diversified, low-cost investments appropriate to his situation and accepts an uncomfortable truth. Markets move down as well as up. This is not a guarantee. It is a long-term plan built around patience, broad exposure, reasonable costs, and the ability to stay invested through uncertainty. Now time begins doing work that effort alone cannot. Imagine he invests $500 each month from 32 to 62. At a hypothetical average annual return of 7%, before taxes and fees, the result could grow to roughly $600,000. He would contribute $180,000 of that himself. The rest would come from growth on earlier growth. Real returns will vary, sometimes sharply, and inflation reduces future purchasing power. The example is not a forecast. It simply shows why starting time matters so much. Starting at 40 is not hopeless. It simply asks each future dollar to carry more weight. At the same hypothetical return, reaching a similar amount by 62 would require a much larger monthly contribution. Delay does not close the door, but it makes the door heavier. That is why your 30s are so powerful. You may not have the freedom of 21, but you often have more income, judgment, and self-knowledge. You can finally see which habits are temporary and which ones are quietly designing your life. The next challenge is that life does not pause while you build wealth. Weddings happen, children arrive, parents need help, careers change. A plan that only works in a perfectly calm decade is not a plan. It is a fantasy with a spreadsheet. So Sebastian stops asking, what is the maximum I can invest? He asks, what amount can I continue through an ordinary difficult year? He creates a baseline contribution small enough to defend, then increases it when his income rises or a debt payment ends. This creates a wealth ratchet. Progress can move upward without demanding constant sacrifice. A raise does not disappear entirely into a more expensive lifestyle. Part improves life today, part strengthens tomorrow. He can enjoy progress without turning every improvement into a permanent monthly obligation. Suppose his monthly investment begins at 300. After a raise, he adds 100. When a loan ends, he redirects another payment instead of absorbing it unconsciously. None of these moments feels dramatic. Together, they change the slope of his future. This is the third decision. Capture part of every improvement before lifestyle expands around it. Not all of it. A life postponed forever is not wealthy. The goal is to make today better and tomorrow safer at the same time. By 35, the numbers may still look ordinary, but his behavior under pressure is different. A car repair is annoying, not catastrophic. A market drop is uncomfortable, not a command to sell. A colleague's expensive holiday does not automatically rewrite his own plan. This matters because comparison is one of the most expensive forces in adult life. In your 30s, other people's choices become highly visible. Larger homes, newer cars, polished celebrations. Their financing remains invisible. You see the purchase, not the pressure attached to it. Sebastian creates a private definition of enough. He decides what he genuinely values: a secure home, time with people he loves, meaningful work, and the freedom to leave harmful situations. Without that definition, every advertisement can volunteer a new goal for his money. A budget now becomes less like punishment and more like casting. Money is assigned a role: daily life, protection, long-term growth, and a little joy. When every pound or dollar has a purpose, spending is not automatically guilt, and saving is not automatically virtue. The question is whether each choice supports the life he is actually trying to build. That makes it easier to cut costs that do not matter and keep the ones that do. Personal finance becomes personal again, rather than a contest in deprivation. Then around 40, something subtle happens. His investments may still be far from the final goal, but contributions are no longer acting alone. Growth begins to become visible. Some years add more than others, some subtract. The line is uneven, yet the engine has started. More importantly, his career decisions change. Because he has savings and lower fixed pressure, he can consider training, negotiate from a steadier position, or leave a workplace that is damaging his health. Wealth does not make every risk wise. It makes some reasonable risk possible. That is the second major reward after reduced panic. Options. Money can buy objects, but accumulated financial strength buys the ability to wait, refuse, recover, or change direction. These verbs often matter more than the nouns people associate with being rich. Of course, the path is not smooth. A recession arrives, a relationship ends, a family emergency consumes part of the buffer. For a while, contributions shrink or stop. The old fantasy says the plan has failed. A durable plan says this is what the buffer was built for. He uses the money without shame. Then when the crisis passes, he rebuilds in order: immediate stability, expensive debt, cash reserve, long-term investing. Progress is not a staircase you are forbidden to descend. It is knowing how to find the stairs again. This is why wealth in your 30s should not be measured only by net worth. Track the months of expenses you could cover. Track expensive debt disappearing. Track the percentage of income directed toward your future. Track whether your choices feel less desperate than last year. These measures reveal progress before compounding becomes dramatic. They also prevent a dangerous mistake: believing that one impressive account balance matters more than the whole system. A person can own investments and still be one missed payment away from panic. By 45, Sebastian has lived through enough uncertainty to stop expecting certainty. He keeps costs reasonable, diversifies, reviews the plan periodically, and avoids reacting to every headline. Boring is no longer an insult. Boring is evidence that the system can operate without becoming his entire personality. He still makes mistakes. He buys something he barely uses. He waits too long to cancel a fee. He becomes cautious at the wrong moment. Building wealth does not produce a flawless person. It produces enough margin that ordinary imperfections do not have to become permanent damage. And that margin grows in more than one direction. There is financial margin, but also time margin and emotional margin. He can take a day to compare options. He can help someone without destabilizing himself. He can solve the actual problem instead of the fastest available problem. Now imagine him at 50. Remember the two versions from the beginning. The wealth-building version may not look rich from the pavement. The house is comfortable, the car is ordinary, and there is no performance of success. But inside his calendar, accounts, and nervous system, life feels different. He can absorb a major repair. He can reduce his hours for a season. He can support a parent within clear limits. He can plan a trip and pay for it deliberately. None of these choices is infinite, and none is guaranteed. But each would have been harder without 20 years of preparation. Notice what did not create this life. He did not predict the perfect stock. He did not optimize every coffee. He did not wait until he felt completely informed. He built a resilient sequence and repeated it. Protect, invest, increase, and stay flexible. If you are 37, 39, or already beyond, do not use the power of an early start as a weapon against yourself. The best starting date may be gone. The best remaining date is still available. Regret cannot compound for you, but action can. Begin with the next honest number. What comes in? What must go out? Which debt is expensive? What cash would stop a surprise becoming a crisis? What contribution could happen automatically without pretending that real life has no costs? Then choose one increase you can connect to a future event. Part of the next raise, the payment that ends, or a subscription you no longer value. This turns good intentions into instructions your future self can follow when life is busy. Review the system once or twice a year and when your life changes. Check the emergency target, investment costs, diversification, taxes relevant to where you live, and whether the plan still fits your responsibilities. For personalized decisions, a qualified independent professional may be worth consulting. Do not confuse review with constant watching. A seed does not grow faster because you dig it up every morning. The work is to create good conditions, keep contributing, and intervene when the plan or your life genuinely requires it. By 60, the deepest change may be this. Money has moved from the center of every fear to the edge of many decisions. It still matters. Markets still surprise. Health, family, and luck still shape the story. Wealth is not control over life. It is greater room inside life. That room was built in tiny pieces. The first automatic transfer, the emergency fund that looked unproductive, the raise partly captured, the calm decision during a falling market, the restart after a difficult year. No single moment felt like transformation. Together, they became one. So picture the two versions of you again. The distance between them is not one brilliant move. It is a sequence of ordinary moves given enough time to become extraordinary. Your 30s are not a deadline. They are a runway, and the runway is still beneath your feet. You do not need to know exactly what life at 50 will cost. You need a system that makes future choices more affordable. Start with protection, add patient growth. Increase when you can, restart when you must. Then let time turn consistency into freedom. If this helped you see your 30s differently, choose the one quiet move your future self will notice first, and make it before the week becomes busy. The richest part of the plan is not the balance you can show today. It is the life you will be able to choose later. If you want to understand not only how money works, but how it shapes the decisions we make, subscribe. This is Sebastian Makes Money.